Okay, we are in day 15, Genesis 31, and today is my grandson, Ford, who we call 40. It is his 7th birthday. So happy birthday, my fabulous grandson. So now we are talking about Jacob, and it was time for him to leave. We talked about yesterday how the grace period had left and lifted, and he knew he had to get out because Laban's attitude completely changed and cheated him and yada, yada, yada. So they left in the middle of the night because poor Jacob, the guy who seems to always do everything right, he felt like they had to escape in the middle of the night or Laban would not allow him to leave. So he left with his 2 wives and all of his heirs and all of the spotted and speckled and black cattle that we had talked about, and goat and sheep. And they were on their journey, and Laban 3 days later heard that they had gone, and he was furious. And it says he and his sons left in a fury to go catch up with them. And when they got there, he was so livid. Why did you leave me? And he said, because I thought you would try to stop us or hurt us. And Jacob literally said, for 20 years, I labored under the heat and the cold. And for years working, 14 years, he worked 7 years for Leah to marry him. He was trying to marry Rachel. He was deceived then too. And then another 7 years to marry Rachel. But God had seen the abuse. So Jacob actually said to Laban, God has seen your abuse and my hard work. And that's why the Lord has appeared to you not to harm me. Because the Lord spoke to Laban saying, do not harm him. And I love how God's protection is sovereign. Even when people want to destroy us, God promises that he will come to our behalf. And I want to read you this little excerpt. It says, in fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side, the God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work, and that's why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. So how amazing that God sovereignly goes before us and literally appeared to Laban and says, do not harm Jacob. So they were able to make a covenant there. Then they are journeying on, and they would have to pass through the land where Esau and all of his descendants were. So he did cheat Esau. We talked about that. But he was terrified that Esau would try to kill him. And he was so worried that he just took it to the Lord, and he had messengers send ahead of him saying, I come to you as my humble servant, hoping you will be friendly to me. And then I love what he says. He says, Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother, because you promised me you would multiply my descendants. So that is Genesis 31. Matthew 10. And what that says is, Jesus is speaking to his followers, and he says, do not be afraid of those who threaten you. And I love what Jesus said. What I whisper in your ear, shout it from the housetops for all to hear. So when the Lord speaks to us, that whispering in the ear, when we're praying and things come to us, that is the Lord speaking to us. And he wants us to go out and share that with others. And he says again, do not be afraid. And do not be afraid of those who can kill your body, because they can never kill your soul. And all of the disciples, every single one of them, they were martyred for the sake of the gospel. And look what happened to Jesus. It could happen to any of us. So instead of being concerned about our physical bodies, it says, fear only God. And we had spoken about that before, about it's not a fear like you're terrified and you're scared, being in the dark alone. It is a reverence, a respect to God. We must put him first. And he loves us so much that it says even the hairs on our head are numbered. So do not be afraid, he says. And everyone who acknowledges me on this earth, I will acknowledge to my Father in heaven. So if we deny Jesus because we're being wimps and we don't want to offend anybody, or we don't want anybody to not like us because we love Jesus, well, if we don't acknowledge Jesus, then he is not going to acknowledge us before God. I think that's fair. And it says that enemies will be right in your own household. There's a great story about my pastor, the church I go to here in Palm Beach, and he was a Sunni Muslim that had an encounter with Jesus Christ, literally an encounter. And he went on to go to Bible school and went back to Turkey, where he's from, and ministered the gospel. Well, he was saying, can you imagine going back to your Sunni Muslim parents and telling them, A, I'm going to quit my job, this engineering job. B, I'm going to Bible college. C, I'm going back to our hometown to minister the gospel. Well, that's a triple whammy, right? But yet, a couple Sundays ago, I went to church and his parents were there, and they were up on stage worshiping the Lord right along with all of us. It was the most beautiful thing, because my pastor did not put his parents or his parents' beliefs before his faith in Jesus. So when John the Baptist was thrown in prison, he sent messengers to say, are you the one, the Messiah, or should we look for others? And Jesus said, go back and tell him what you see. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised from the dead, and the good news, the gospel, is being preached. And after that, Jesus says, do not take offense. I'm sure there was a time when John the Baptist was sitting in prison and Jesus was out doing all these miraculous things. And he's like, no, wait a minute, God. I came and baptized before you came in your name, and I was the precursor of you, the coming Messiah, and here I am in prison. Well, again, this whole chapter talks about our situations. Are we going to worry about what happens to us physically on this earth, or are we going to be more consumed about and concerned what are we supposed to do for the gospel and for Jesus Christ? And the first thing we're supposed to do is love him with all of our hearts, because he is our Savior and he loved us first. Day 15, we're still in Psalm 13, which is where David is crying out to God. And David had battles all around him, many days of his life. He was the great warrior for God. And he had so much sorrow and so much devastation that I'm going to read you this text, because we all go through the same things in this life. We may not have physical wars around us, but we go through wars within our families. We go through spiritual wars. We go through wars maybe at our offices. We're not being treated properly. Everybody deals with it. And David says, how long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? How many times have we thought that? Then he goes on to say, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. He had seen many, many times God fighting his battles for him. And he was able to say, yet I trust in you, because he had seen God come through so many times on his behalf. And we're all going to go through tough times, but we all have to know that we have a loving God that loves us and wants to rescue us from people hurting us. I think I actually repeated the proverb for today yesterday, but I think that's okay, because I think this proverb is so important that maybe it happened on purpose so we could reiterate what God is saying to us. So I'm going to read it again to you. It says, "She, wisdom, offers you long life in your right hand and riches and honor in your left. She will guide you down delightful paths, and all her ways are satisfying." How cool is that? It doesn't mean we're going to have a perfect life, but if we rely on God's wisdom, our paths will be satisfying, and we will have long life, and we will have riches and honor to go out and bless the kingdom. That is God's promises to us.